Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to my 5-star predictions follow-up. I actually did it within the year, which I'm super impressed by, and I'm really excited to talk about some of these. Here is the stack of ones that I own physically. I think most of these I won't have had at the time of recording. The thing that I'm worried about most with this video is having to go back and watch an old video of mine because some things have changed. I have gotten better, I hope. You know, hearing the sound of your own voice is always a little bit uncomfortable, so hope you're ready to be uncomfortable with me. Please do not judge me for these headphones. I should say, I do remember that I was slightly intoxicated for this video. I remember I had a glass of wine, so apologies for my past behavior. Just leave it. Hello and welcome to another internet content. Today we are going to be going over my 5-star predictions. It's 2 videos in one, collab, falling apart, a little bit drunk. It is funny for me. I make YouTube videos because I think I'm funny. I make jokes and hope that other people find them funny, but if they don't, I still find them funny. And I don't know. Rewatching this isn't as painful so far. Since it has become apparent to me that I don't actually know anything about the books that I'm going to want to read, this will mostly end up being me reading you Goodreads summaries, so look forward to that. I mean, that hasn't changed. I don't anticipate me ever knowing what the books that I read entail, because I like knowing as little as possible. Get started. The first book that I have on this list is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This is a story about murder. All that you know, what most of the books I read about are. What I know about this one is that it's a very famous thriller, and thrillers are one of my favorite genres, so I'm very interested in this one. I know his last release got some mixed reviews, and he has another one coming out this year, Every Value Break. That sounds like it will actually be really good, so hopefully This was before Every Value Break was released and no one liked it. It's tentatively on my TBR, but I don't know if I'm ever actually gonna get to it. All right, so I did read The Kind Worth Killing. I read it mostly on audio and I gave it 4 stars. So not quite where I wanted it to be, but I'm more fond of it in my memory. It wasn't quite as thrilling as I wanted it to be, but there were some good twists and some really interesting characters. I really liked Anna, I want to say was her name. The story of her growing up on the farm I thought was super interesting, and she did a year abroad somewhere. Like, that whole plotline was super interesting. I wish that that was more of the book. It was mostly whenever the boy POVs got involved that I cared a bit less. But it's something that I would still recommend, especially for a bit of an older thriller. I think that it holds up. Older, I'm gonna regret this. It's gonna have come out in like 2015. Yeah, so it's not old at all. Never mind. So not quite a 5-star, but still a successful read. We have Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This is probably the most risky one on the list because I've heard that this is one that you're either going to love or that you're going to hate. I have heard that the twist ending of this is one of the most wild ones you'll ever read, so I don't even want to read the Goodreads description just because I want to go in knowing as little as possible, but I am very excited about this one. You can tell I have some slurred speech there, which is fun. Behind Her Eyes, I have it in this stack, which should tell you something because I loved it and that I had to go out and buy a physical copy. This is absolutely 5 stars. The twist ending is wild, but I think that it holds up even without the twist. Like, I was engaged from page 1. I loved the writing in it. I loved the characters in it. It's just so compelling, and I think that people forget that because the ending sort of overshadows that, but I can't recommend this enough. I know I completely understand people who hate the ending, but I loved it. This was also a good one for letting you figure out some things and not others, because I knew that something was up, but I never could have guessed what happened in here. I don't want to say anything
but highly recommend. 5 stars, definitely a success.
Next up, we have Natalie Tan's book of Luck and Fortune by Roselle Kim. I honestly don't know where I first heard about this book from.
I know. It was something that Helen Hoang wrote a Goodreads review for, saying that it was lovely and magical, and she gave it 5 stars, and I trust her wholeheartedly, so I assumed that I would also give it 5 stars.
It's been on my TBR forever, and I just haven't gotten around to it for some reason. Goodreads says, after the news of her mother's death, Natalie Tan returns home. The two women haven't spoken since Natalie left in anger 7 years ago when her mother refused to support her chosen career as a chef. Natalie is shocked to discover the vibrant neighborhood of San Francisco's Chinatown that she remembers from her childhood is fading. Okay, so I clearly didn't read this ever.
You can see my enthusiasm for the book slowly draining out of me because it doesn't sound like something I would enjoy.
This doesn't sound familiar to me at all, but I have heard that it's a romance and I'm still interested.
So it is marketed as a romance, but it has one of the worst romances that I've ever read. This kind of story, I understand wanting to have the cute boy in it, but this boy was just awful and I hated him so much. So this one is the most recent one that I read, so I have a lot to say about it. I gave it 3 stars, mostly out of respect. I think it's probably closer to a 2 star for me. Like, I didn't hate it, it just did so many things that don't work for me. This is another book that is about food, which is something I have realized I don't like in books. And I think it's because food tends to be spoken about like it's sort of magical. This one leaned even more heavily into that, and there's like magical realism, which is something that I don't enjoy. There were things that I liked about it. I liked the concept of this woman going back to her childhood neighborhood that's kind of falling apart and getting to know the neighbors and helping to revitalize the community. That's a story that could really work for me, but this wasn't that story. I felt like it talked itself in circles a lot and there wasn't enough plot. The romance was awful, like I said. It had a lot of potential, but it just didn't work for me. I understand why someone would love this, and I didn't hate my time reading it. I just wish that it had been shorter and less magical and had a boy who didn't suck so much. So yeah, definitely not a success there.
Next up, we have Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl. I have heard that this is sort of like a YA thriller with a Groundhog Day element where people are reliving the same day over and over again. I know a lot of the books on this list are thrillers, so I kind of want to keep my knowledge vague, but this one I'm very interested in. So much that I bought a hardcover copy, so I'm invested in this one especially. Next up.
Thankfully, it paid off. You didn't waste, how much? $25 on this. I absolutely love this one. This one is definitely 5 stars. It is unlike anything that I've ever read before. The merging of genres. There are 3 distinct acts to this. There is the opening one that's Groundhog Day, and then the second one is like a murder mystery, and then the third one is House of Leaves. Like, I don't know how to explain this book. It is something that has to be read to be believed, and I'm so glad that I read it. My only critique of this is it leans a little YA, but I'm so happy that I was able to read this. Oh, another criticism. I wish that it had been multi-POV. That's the only other thing. But I'm not mad. This is also something that I feel like I'm going to reread and get something new out of every time. There's 2 measly tabs in it. What did I think was worth it? Oh, these are just like my theorizing at what I think is gonna happen. There aren't words to describe this book. It is such a trip, but I really, really enjoyed it. Are there little things that I would change? Sure. This is just so unique and beautiful cover, by the way. I need more books like this. If you have a suggestion of a book like this, please, please give it to me. I am begging you. 5 stars, if I didn't already say it.
Up, we have Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I think that's right. I said it and immediately regretted it. No,
It's
it is
right.
Backman. He's the author of Beartown, which is a wildly successful book that I read a couple years ago, and I think has very different tone from this.
This one I like. I said that I think that the tone is very different, and little did I know how wildly different the tone would be. Another spoiler here, because I went out and purchased this book because I love it more than words can describe. It's so good. I should mention this one and 2 others I read for a vlog I'll link. But this one, spoiler for that vlog, I cried uncontrollably. So if you want to see that, please, you're welcome to. This one is just so incredibly charming. I highly, highly recommend the audiobook for this. I think it really makes it. But it's just such a sweet story about these strangers talking about their lives. Sort of slow in a weird way, like they readdress the same events a couple of times, but with a slightly new angle each time that changes your perspective on what's happening. I absolutely love things like that. The fact that Fredrik Backman could write this and Beartown does not make sense to me. Like, these are not the same author. These are not the same type of story. These are wildly different, but so expertly done. I just think he's incredible. This is also a translated work, so translators deserve credit on this one too. It's also just ridiculous. Like, the humor in this is so on point. Like, there's the rabbit on certain other covers. Here's a picture of the horrifying cover that you could get. Like, that also represents the story as much as this does, and I can't explain it to you. This feels like another one that has to be read to be believed. Definitely 5 stars.
We have Hench by Natalie, Zina, Walshots. It just came onto my radar recently, and I am the most excited about. I think of everything on the list, this is the one I'm most excited about. This just sounds like it was plucked directly from my brain. Deadpool meets the Incredibles in Hench, a novel about a woman who does administrative work for villains and discovers her greatest superpower, for good or evil, is a properly executed spreadsheet. If this one lives up to the hype that I am internally giving it, it's going to be incredible. I'm so excited about this one. Next up.
So, spoiler, I don't own this book because it was awful. It's the worst book that I read for 5-star predictions. I'm giving it 2 stars, but I'm angry enough to give it a 1. It was so disappointing. The first 10% was my perfect book. The humor was on point, the action was on point, the characters were all really interesting, the world building was really good. And then it fell apart, and I'm so sad about it. What ended up happening was the story got into a cycle that wasn't fun. So the main character, the story opens up by her getting injured by a superhero, and she sort of wants to seek revenge. So she goes and works for a supervillain. But then in the course of working for him, she'll get injured again and then have to go through a recovery period. And then she'll get injured again and go through a recovery period. And the story never went anywhere. Like, there's so much you could have done with it. And then the ending was just so stupid. And action that you couldn't follow at all, and it was just ridiculous. That's definitely one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me, because it should work and it became so boring. How can a book about a lizard supervillain that you work for be boring? And yet it was. It's just a huge disappointment. I gave it 2 stars, but while I'm talking, I'm like, why wouldn't I have given it 1 star? But that is the worst one on this list. So technically no 1 stars, which is good, I guess.
We have The Project by Courtney Summers. This is our first 2021 release. It is about a girl whose sister, I think, gets caught up in a cult and she has to go in and save her. Sadie is the only thing that I've read by Courtney Summers, so I feel like if this one lives up to my expectations, she's going to be skyrocketed to a new all-time favorite author.
Okay, so this isn't quite a spoiler, but that was a most anticipated. It had not been released at the time, and I did buy a physical copy, before reading it because there was a special Canadian edition, and look at it, it's beautiful. And thankfully it was beautiful inside. I gave this one 5 stars. There are definitely things that I would want to change about it, but that isn't going to detract from all of the amazing things that the story did. This one I tabbed. I mean, that's a lot for me. I know it's not a lot for other people, but this one, the writing, I think, is what really got me. It's so smart and introspective. This is one that like should be studied. So this follows 2 sisters, and one of the sisters is in a cult and the other one is working for a journalism startup. And the parallels in their story are so interesting, and the characters are all really well done. The atmosphere is really good. It's really not that similar to Sadie. There are definitely like themes throughout it, but if I didn't know these were by the same author, I don't know if I would have been able to tell, but not in a bad way. I just think that Courtney Summers is able to do so many different things. My big complaint with this one is I wish that it had been aged up into adult, because I think the characters are over 18. It's just a marketing thing, but I think if it had been able to go harder on some of the unpleasant cult stuff, it could have been even more incredible than it is. This feels like almost literary fiction. If you want to sort of dip your toe in and see how you feel about that in more of a thriller setting, I really recommend this one. It's not fully thriller, not fully literary, but fully amazing, and a full 5 stars.
We have A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I have read and loved The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is the start of a new series called The Monk and the Robot, I believe. And I don't know, it just sounds like something that I'm gonna love, especially the intersection of technology and philosophy.
Okay, so another thing that hadn't been released yet, I bought it before reading, and I wanted to love it, but I just didn't. I gave this 3 stars. Another one that I did tab, like there are a lot of things that I did really like in here, but it sort of goes downhill. The main character in this is Dex, a non-binary tea monk whose job is just sort of to serve people tea and listen to their problems. And so much comes out of that that is so interesting that by the time the robot came in, I didn't care. I wanted less robot and more monk. The writing in here is beautiful, and a lot of the ideas presented are really well done. I just wanted more. I don't know if the problem was that it was a novella, but it just wasn't as charming as I wanted it to be. I'm struggling to remember why I didn't like this, because like looking through my tabs, every tab is a beautiful quote. Everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule, and that's exactly where the trouble starts. One person can do a lot of damage. Like just little things like that. The whole book is peppered with them. Let's look up my review to see what I said. So my review says I thought about DNFing it right at the beginning, which is true. And in a novella, if it takes you a while to get into, that's a lot of pages that don't work. I think my problem was that the tea monk stuff was so excellent that when we were distracted from that, it just wasn't really worth it to me. I also said in my review that I read 2 novels and 2 novellas from Becky Chambers, and the novellas are the weak point. I think they were both 3 stars and the novels were 5 stars.
We have For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. I know Samantha Downing has written My Lovely Wife and
So this was before I read My Lovely Wife, which I didn't put as a 5-star prediction, but I loved. I loved it more than For Your Own Good.
Started it previous to this. I have read neither of those. I am so far behind, but this sounds like something that I'm just gonna love. I'm hoping that—
Why wouldn't I have put My Lovely Wife as a 5-star prediction instead of For Your Own Good? I don't know.
Like, especially My Lovely Wife is something that I'm gonna love as well, but this sounds very much up my alley. Evil Teacher just sounds excellent to me.
Evil Teacher does sound excellent, but Evil Couple, also excellent.
I don't know what it says about me that Evil Teacher sounds like something that's totally gonna be my jam, but it's totally gonna be my jam.
So the big problem here was that the teacher was not evil enough. He was just sort of annoyed that his students were dumb and privileged. And honestly, like, same. I'm not mad at it. I read this book also for that 5-star predictions vlog, and at the time I gave it 5 stars, but I've bumped it down to a 4 just because it didn't get where I wanted it to go. And I think that My Lovely Wife, which I also gave 4 stars, did more things that I liked. I still think that the storytelling was a bit disconnected in both of them, but I do really enjoy Samantha Downing.
The final book, if you're tired of me talking about Helen Hoang, just click off the video now because we're going to talk about Helen Hoang again. The author of The Kiss Quotient, amazing. The Bride Test, also amazing. Has the 3rd book in the series coming out called The Heart Principle. And it's gonna be, guess what? Amazing. It's about one of the side characters.
Like, how do I remember doing that? Is my humor just exactly the same? Or, I don't know. It's funny.
And I think he's in both of these books. Helen Hoang can do no wrong. And I have utmost faith that this is gonna be a 5-star. If I had to put money on any one of these, definitely being a 5-star, it's gonna be The Heart Principle.
So another pre-order, I got this one signed, which was very exciting, and it came with a bunch of cookies. This one has a whole dedicated vlog just for this one book that I'm really proud of, so you should go watch that if you don't want to be spoiled on how I felt about this. I gave it 5 stars, but I do think it is the weakest of the trilogy. Okay, no, I don't think that. The thing about Helen Hoang's books is they come down to the author's note. They're very personal stories, and you really get a sense of what's going on in her life at the time. And at this point in her life, she was going through a really challenging time. And it's reflected here. It is not as fun as the other books and sits in an uncomfortable sadness for quite a while. So the first part is where the majority of the romance takes place, which was incredible, like just smiling from ear to ear the whole time reading it. And then the rest of it was definitely harder to get through and not necessarily something that I can sympathize with in the same way as the other books. I think that's a big problem. I still adore the characters in here. I still loved the writing. I just think that my expectations were a bit different. What I'm hearing myself say is this isn't 5 stars, this is 4 stars. But thinking about rating it 4 stars hurts my heart. It is worthy of 5 stars. So I'm giving it 5 stars.
Honestly, filming this video is kind of making me want to abandon my current TBR, but I'm gonna stick with it. We're gonna work on prioritizing these as soon as possible. Let me know if you're anticipating any of these.
I mean, as soon as possible is dreaming. I read them all within 9 months, so that's perfectly respectable to read 10 books. Really, I'm proud of myself. So to recap, I had 5 5-stars, 2 4-stars, 2 3-stars, and 1 2-star. So overall, pretty good. Like, even those 4 stars I consider a success because every book can't be everything. So really only 3 duds. Of course, 3 stars isn't bad. Only Hench am I truly bitter about. I guess I can take these off now. Oh, my voice sounds so different. I'm so sorry that this is what you've been hearing. The physical stack, if I had to rank it, choosing between my children, I didn't even realize I own all of the 5 stars. I probably should realize that. I think this is the order. Now I don't know, with Behind Her Eyes being the best and Song for the Wild Bill being the worst, but I don't know. With so many 5 stars, they're all kind of interchangeable. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know if any of these are also on your 5-star predictions list or what you think should be on my 5-star predictions list for next year. Thank you for joining me. I always appreciate your support, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.